Hello and welcome to this very special BIFA Insider event for Kajaki. My name is Anna Smith. I'm a film critic and a big fan of the film, so it is my great pleasure to welcome here today the film's director, Paul Catus. Welcome. And also the producer, Andrew de Lotbiniere.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us. We all sat and watched the film again together. How did you feel watching it again? No doubt you've seen it many times, but does it bring back memories and feelings?
I have seen it many times, it's true. It's odd the way the brain works, because I thought I'd never forget the experience, but gradually it is drifting away into the distance. Yeah. So it was quite nice to watch it again.
Yeah. How about you, Andrew?
Yes, I hadn't seen it this year, so that's nearly 3 months, if not 4 months. It was really nice to see it. I haven't seen it on a small screen pretty much since the edit suite, which is interesting because all the screenings and all the support we've done for the film have been in cinemas.
It's quite interesting. I mean, we were talking about the filming experience as we were watching it. Can you talk me through some of the challenges? And you filmed in Jordan. What were the challenges specifically on location?
Heat probably would be number one. I mean, it was regularly over 50 degrees in the Wadi. We filmed all the Wadi sequence first, and then we filmed it in story order. But every day you'd go down into basically a cauldron of heat to go and work.
Wow.
Going down after lunch was particularly painful because it was the heat of the day and you just sort of calmed down a little bit. Yeah. On the flip side is you knew how long your day would be because we could only start shooting at about 10 to 7 through to sort of 10 past 7, and we had to stop by 10 past 5.
That's quite a nice
the sun was gone.
Luxury in the film business, isn't it?
Well, it means that everyone knows where they're at,
yeah.
And so there's no staying late.
Exactly. Yeah.
So the bar got visited quite early.
What about the production challenges from your point of view?
Well, I think we were very lucky finding Jordan as a location. I mean, the location is so central to the film. And you look at the original pitch from Afghanistan of the Kajaki Dam, and you can't cheat that. And so Paul did trips to South Africa, and we looked at Morocco, looked at Spain, and looked at Jordan. And on about first or second day in Jordan, we looked at a number of locations. We found the Kafrain Dam, and it was brilliant. And we sort of knew, everything kind of went from there. So then it was like, okay, so we're in Jordan. We met with some different production service companies out there who were options to work with. Found a very good line producer who'd worked in Jordan. Found just an amazing exec producer who had some very good, strong Jordanian connections, as well as being someone who we wanted to work with on the film. And then it was just about access to location, building the infrastructure around that access because the location was in the middle of nowhere. So we worked with army engineers to put a road into the location, and then had place for unit base. It was still pretty primitive.
How long was the shoot, all told?
That's gone already.
I can tell you
exactly.
Shoot was 26 days in Jordan, over 4 6-day weeks plus 2 extra days. A day back in the UK in a water tank. We were in Jordan for about 8 days before we started filming, so there was a little bit of acclimatisation, rehearsal, which was actually, we'd had a week in London with the actors, and then we took them out to Jordan. And that was very important for rehearsal time and getting to know each other.
Yeah, the bonding experience and everything. We've had a few tweets come in from people watching, and everyone's curious to know how much of it is real in terms of all the detail. Obviously, we know it's based on a true story, but how much of it is real, and was there any invention at all?
Well, the person to probably listen to is Tug Hartley himself, who, having seen the film, said that it's 99% real.
Wow.
For that extra 1%, you'd have had to have been there. So I take that as a compliment. We definitely followed all the facts. We became quite fastidious about making sure that everything was authentic as possible, right down to the guy's positioning, etc., etc. Even when it was difficult to squeeze that into what you might call a film sort of story, you had to work with the facts, and so the facts came first for us all the time. So it is, very real.
And how much consulting went on with the real soldiers involved?
A lot. So we started out with the coroner's report and the Board of Inquiry report into the incident, both invaluable documents because they charted the sequence of events exactly, and it was the agreed happening, if you like. There are also some really handy sketches in there. I remember one particular sketch where a soldier who was there had sketched where everyone was in the Wadi.
Right.
So that was obviously invaluable for us. But from that point, we got in touch first of all with Bob and Jem, who are Mark's mum and dad, really just to sort of reach out and say, look, would you be happy for us to do this? And can you tell us a little bit about your son? They were happy, and they were very pleased to tell us about their son, and showed us a lot of pictures and told us a lot of the story. So a lot of the things that Mark says in the film are reflected from what Bob and Jen remember of him. And they then also introduced us to Tug, so they had his mobile number, so we got in touch with him, and he left the army, so we spoke to him, and he told us his story. So now we had quite a lot of good factual information. We then approached the MOD, because in order to speak to serving soldiers, you have to get their permission.
Oh, right, okay.
And an awful lot of the soldiers were still serving. And that then took me 18 months to get their consent to actually talk to the soldiers.
Gosh.
They did
before you could even speak.
Before you could even speak.
Wow.
They did finally relent,
Yes.
and they let us talk to the soldiers. 3 months after that, they withdrew their permission for us to talk to the soldiers, but that's another story. But it was invaluable, because every guy we spoke to came with a little cinematic gift, a little story that happened, singing happy birthday with one another, the water bottles, all of that was just information that came to us, and you wouldn't have made up.
What kind of reaction have you had from the men you consulted with?
So we did a screening night before we did our premiere. We did a screening for the soldiers.
Right.
We booked Soho screening room on Derby Street, and they didn't all come down. Some of them were happy to come the next day, but I think we had about 7 of them, and some of them knew each other pretty well. Some of them almost hadn't seen each other since that incident, because they'd got injured and then left the forces or just moved away. We put them in the room with a couple of crates of beer. We shut the door, we crossed our fingers.
Tom went in there with them. I thought it was remarkably brave.
Tom
Williams, the writer.
Yes.
And we left them to it, and actually, we could tell, we could hear them. The banter was all coming back. They loved, to an extent. I think suddenly it was like, oh look, that's the guy playing me, and he's better looking than you, So they could take, they could rib each other about that. But no, they came out, and I think it was a pretty sobering experience for them. I think the fact that they'd read the scripts, they'd kept reading scripts, feeding into it, but that's still very different from what they suddenly saw on screen. And I think it was very real for them, and that brought back, it was a pretty crap day. That brought that back to them. But to us, they were very pleased. They were very proud, actually, and to us that was very important.
That must have felt fantastic to know that you had it.
And I think they all, they said, you've done right by Mark.
Yeah.
And you made a good film, and that was the best critical praise we could have got.
Exactly.
We then went to the pub.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
For quite a while.
Sounds like a good night. In terms of the amount of time the actors spent with, who the guys they were playing, in when it was possible, were they sort of bonding? Did they spend a lot of time together?
Well, it's an interesting decision as to whether you introduce the actors to the guys they're playing, because the danger and I was very aware of this, the danger would be that they would then end up almost sort of trying to mimic the person that they'd met, rather than reinventing the character for themselves. And I thought it was really important that they reinvented the characters for themselves. So I was in 2 minds. I did let them have access to the transcripts of Tom and my interviews with the guys, so they could read through what these guys had said. And you draw an awful lot just by the way people talk. But then after we did one day and an evenings, a night's boot camp with the real paras, some of the real paras, and after that we went for dinner with about 4 or 5 of the real guys, and they met their counterparts for the first time. But it was done very informally, very socially, with no sort of desire for it to be a theatrical learning experience or anything like that. It was just a question of sort of informally saying hi. Subsequently, quite a lot of them got in touch with one another and stayed in touch.
Well, that's nice.
Yeah. Well, that was after the shoot.
I mean, there was the odd occasion, I seem to remember, where we call the actors from the set and say, we've got a problem here, what trousers were you wearing, or what was going on here, and they'd feed in there and then.
But our cast felt a big responsibility playing these guys, and I think they were all aware of that, and they were all very nervous about meeting these guys. And even for the ones who met them after the event. And some of them, I think, didn't even meet to the premiere, and some just quietly had a beer in between wrapping the film and the film, being released. And I think they all made special, sort of special friendships with the guy they were playing.
That's lovely. One viewer was asking, have you had any charities get involved with the film at all?
We did. I mean, again, we sort of got involved with the charities partly because, you would normally probably pay people for telling their life stories to you and things like that,
Yeah.
which we thought was just going to be awkward and difficult. So we thought it was far better if we just agreed with everybody that we'd give an element of the profit of the movie to charities, which is what we've done. And then also we got in touch with, I think, four.
So we work with four charities: Walking with Wounded, Help for Heroes, the Royal Commission for Disabled Soldiers, Hashemite Commission for Disabled Soldiers in Jordan, and the Royal British Legion. So it's in a way from the UK side, we sort of picked the big three: RBL, Help for Heroes, Walking with Wounded, and they all helped us, and we sort of worked with them. And at different times, we've done events with them, and we've used their media channels to help promote the film. But from their point of view, in fact, only today I got an email from someone at RBL, who Royal British Legion, who'd done an event. From their point of view, they just say the film is fantastic because there's a campaigning piece, there's an awareness piece, there's a way of putting a bunch of people in the cinema and then getting a sense of what it's like to be out there, not just from the injury point of view, but just to be a soldier and what you do to put yourself on the line. I think they've all thought it's been a pretty amazing film to be associated with and to be part of. So we're really happy to be working with them.
No, that's a really positive outcome. Must again feel great to feel like you're doing something positive in that respect. Yeah. Did you have any real security threats while you were filming? This sounds like a story.
We're allowed to tell this story.
Well, it depends. I'll tell you what. So we were filming in a pretty remote area of Jordan. We'd been told.
Well, hold on to it. It wasn't that remote. I'm going to correct you at this point. The
joy
of Kafrane Dam is that it's in the middle of nowhere, in its own middle of nowhere. 40 minutes up the road is Amman, the capital.
Wow.
And much more importantly, about 20 minutes is the Dead Sea and the Dead Sea resorts and five-star hotels with very nice bars and all the rest of it. So whilst that it is in an area is quite remote, it's surrounded by some other areas. However, in that particular area and the particular place we were filming, we obviously had to get consent to film at the dam from the landowner. And their crop rotation techniques involved some
one particular crop,
which is probably illegal in Jordan, I suspect. Anyway, they looked after our set, fully armed with AK-47s and all the rest of it, and there were a couple of incidents with them overnight.
And there was an incident when we were so when we wrapped the film, the location fee suddenly went up, and it was suggested that we might want to settle the bill before they let us off the land.
Oh, really?
So that security aside, generally though, the security in Jordan is fantastic. The Film Commission were amazing. They looked after us. They knew we were there. They have several productions going through at a time, but they definitely looked after us, treated us very well, looked out for us, and actually as a place to film, Jordan felt immensely secure. Amman is very secure. The Dead Sea resorts we were at felt very secure, and all the people, the technicians were fantastic. So there didn't ever feel any kind of security issue. I know we're in the Middle East, we're not far from Syria, not far from Iraq.
And you could have come across farmers like that anywhere.
Yeah, well, I guess that's true.
Yeah.
That's very true.
Yeah.
Let's talk a bit about the casting. I mean, what did you look for when you set out to find the right people?
One of the key things we wanted to do is I was going to cast someone who was going to be a Yorkshireman, why not cast a Yorkshire actor? We're going to cast someone as a Scot, cast a Scots actor. If you're going to cast, and once you embark on that, it's great because what comes with it is first of all you don't have to worry about accents, so you don't have to be spotting that. But secondly, a lot of their life experience is very similar to the life experience of the guys that they're supposed to be portraying. So Scott Kyle, for instance, who played Stu Pearson, was brought up 3 miles away from where Scott was brought up. So, they had a common background, which stripped away an awful lot of work that you normally do as a director, trying to get an actor to understand who this person is. Well, we're sort of halfway there, which, genuinely helps a lot. The other aspect was that, we knew we wanted to cast from comparative unknowns. A, obviously the budget couldn't afford stars as such. But B, because these are everyday guys, and it would seem to be sensible to go for everyday guys. I think the film would be fundamentally different if there was a known face playing any of the roles. Apart from that, so you know that he probably survived because he's going to last the entire time. So that would distort the tension.
Yes.
And I think when you watch the film, you genuinely don't know who's going to live and who's going to die. So that helps in a big sense for the film. Plus, we got a cadre of actors who just had no star values or anything like that. So everyone mucked in together, which really helped, and I think comes across on screen.
Yeah, I mean, they seem very convincingly bonded, and there's no real hierarchy. Was that your experience in dealing with them, Andrew?
Yeah, and they were great. And actually, interesting, one of the things which I think is not necessarily usual is that they all kept to each other's screen name the whole shoot.
Oh, okay.
And it wasn't until sort of someone would be wrapped a week from the end when it was suddenly like, you know, he's off, and then someone would say, oh, you know, see you, Mark. And it'd be like, Mark? I thought you were called Tug. But the whole time, you know, in the bar,
Wow.
on and off set, everybody was known by, and yeah, the crew all called them by their screen name as well.
Do you know what a very weird thing is? I think we were at a screening, was it the DVD launch, and we had, you know, some of the military guys themselves, and I think Tug was calling the actor who played Smudge. So it was so complete sort of embedded that was what the name was going to be, which was quite weird.
Yeah, it sounds like everything felt almost sort of blurring the lines between reality and.
Yeah, although I think those guys, cast-wise, would also say, you know, they're not soldiers, because a lot of time people go, oh, I can't believe what you went through. You know, look at you on screen there, and I think, you know, they put their hands up and say, the real blokes. That's who you want to look at.
Yeah. What are the actors up to now, broadly speaking? Is anyone doing anything we should know about?
Mark Stanley, who played Tug, has just finished in Dickensian, which is on TV. David Elliott's got a film who played Mark. So David Elliott won the Scottish BAFTA for Best Actor last year for his role performance as Mark Wright. And David is in a film that's coming out, I think, later this year that he shot in New Zealand.
Liam's been in Beowulf.
Beowulf.
And they've all hopefully, you know, pick up parts. None of them, which is slightly annoying, has been cast as Batman or Superman or something like that, which would have been really handy for our sales.
It would.
Yeah. When someone does that, they suddenly become a star. Everyone looks at their back catalogue, which would
it could yet happen.
It'll
They're all
come.
very good. These are the stars of the future here. And we were playing a little game during the film, Count the Sea Bombs. How many are allowed at this certificate?
It's something that Tom is the writer, found out quite late in the scripting process. Because if you'd read, you know, the original draft, there were many sea bombs.
Right.
And we just consulted and found out that, you know, if you wanted a 15 certificate, you were allowed exactly 3.
Exactly 3.
Which is weird, actually.
And the context is very important. You know, so you know, a very violent, threatening word like that is, you know, man attacking a woman, saying that is much worse than a Joshy, don't be such a whatever. Which is kind of how we used it, you know, in the film. It's part of that army banter. Which you probably, you know, fair enough. So we did a screening and one of the guys stood up, well, I've served blah, 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 and I thought your film was very good, but I must say, you know, the one bit that wasn't realistic was there wasn't nearly enough swearing. Which I think he was saying as a compliment because there was a lot of swearing, but
No, well, that kind of makes sense. I mean, you have to make it authentic, but you can only go so far. We've had a question come in and say, how much did the actors train? You mentioned boot camp. What did that involve?
Actually, just before you do boot camp, before we got there very early on, we cast them about 2 months before we went off to Jordan to shoot. We gave them all some diet notes, and you know, I think there was a little bit of nervousness because we were like, you know, you're going to have your tops off, you're soldiers, you probably want to man up a little bit, and so we gave them these diet notes. We worked with a brilliant nutritionist who sort of told you what to do, partly to sort of not lose weight, but to sort of hone your body. And they were amazingly rigorous in how they followed that.
Especially given that the shoot kept getting delayed. So instead of this being a 4-week sort of crash diet thing, I mean, David Elliott especially just stuck to it religiously. Right? And he sort of turned up just before I said, for God's sake, go and get a McDonald's. This is just ridiculous. You're taking this too far. But the boot camp was great because some paras organised it for us. Again, our military advisor organised it, where we went down close to the para camps, actually, Friday Woods, And they just put us through our paces. So we all had to take off everything that was us. So on with the fatigues, goodbye watches, goodbye mobile phones. You're now a soldier for the next 24 hours. I have to admit that when they first went out on patrol, I just turned around to the military advisor and said, "We've got a problem here. This is Dad's army." But fortunately, we managed to get past that
What
stage.
were they doing?
Well, it was just, if people go out on patrol and they haven't,
They've only seen it in the movies.
they've only seen
Right.
the legs are just moving wrong and all that. Anyway, we got round that problem, and we stayed overnight, sort of under canvas, and I had to go out and stag, which is go and check that no one's attacking the camp and business like that, which was really good. We ate real army rations. We went through the whole process, and again, it was quite sort of a good bonding experience with the actors, sort of suddenly realising what they were getting involved with. And also, Luke Hardy, who was our military advisor, took them on some medical courses, teaching them how to use tourniquet and all the rest of it, which, needless to say, in the film was extremely useful. But probably the key thing that happened was that a para stood up in front of them at one point and said, "Okay, guys, you're doing this. I'm pleased you're all taking it seriously, and you will take it seriously, because I served with these guys. I knew Mark Wright, and if you get it wrong, I'll be after you." And I'll tell you, you've never seen a group of actors suddenly go quiet and realise that they're actually involved in something very serious.
Yeah.
And from that point on, we had no discipline issues at all. Really.
Their professionalism was just amazing.
Yeah, that would do it, I'm sure. Yeah. Where did the funding come from for this? We heard it wasn't the most traditional. Is that true?
So we did a mixture of funding. As first-time filmmakers, it's not as easy to go down those traditional routes. So we did a mixture. We did some sort of pre-funding, if you like, before the film started, which we did through Indiegogo, which is a really good platform. It was a really good way of sort of almost testing the concept. We're making this film, starting to build a database and an audience of people, and very soon that kind of spread into that army environment. And we were getting little anecdotal feedback like, "That's brilliant, you've got to make this, such a good story, I knew Mark, I'll come and see it." And that was quite nice. That was a sort of reassuring, there's people are into this. That raised nearly £50,000, which we were able to use for casting, we were able to use for location recce's and some early development costs. Bulk of the funding came through private equity, so individual investors through an EIS scheme, which is, I think, is actually not untraditional for sort of low budget first and second feature films. And then we had a little bit of gap finance on top of that.
Right, well, congratulations. It was all worth it in the end. It seems like a very long process. Was there ever a point where you sort of were struggling with it, thinking, "Oh my goodness, is this ever going to happen?" Or?
Well, the natural assumption as an independent filmmaker is that it won't happen,
Right.
but you're going to carry on regardless. I think is the default position of anybody that's tried to make a film.
Yeah.
So it took 4 years probably from the moment of having the idea through to actually delivering the film. Although the last bit was very, very quick.
The whole of the last bit was quick. I mean, from the beginning of January 2014, when we basically started fundraising and said to ourselves, "We need this much money, we're going to shoot this film in the summer." I think that's we'd had the script and we'd had scripts and we knew what we were wanting to do and going to do for three and a bit years before that. But actually that last 9 months it didn't feel like it went very slowly. There were moments where we still didn't know, will we get over the funding barrier?
Go, no go was right the way up to hence the long diet for those guys.
Yes, exactly.
What we did know also is that we'd been turned down already by the BBC and Film 4 and and BFI. So it can take a long time. You submit your film, you hang around waiting for a decision, and then it's no. So that takes a chunk of time as well.
No doubt, yeah. What would be your advice to budding independent filmmakers? I mean, you sort of said, well, be pessimistic, but just carry on anyway. Any other kind of...
Well, apart from get a proper job, have a proper job.
Have a proper job,
I think,
really.
in all seriousness, Andrew and I run a corporate production company. That's how we stay alive.
Right.
That's how we pay the mortgage.
Is it? Right.
Because getting a film off the ground, and especially an independent film, it's a reasonably thankless task.
Yes.
And you don't really get paid for doing that work.
No.
But if you've got a passion for it, you've got to stick to it and have a go.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd also say and I think we were lucky with this for a first film, but make sure you know your market. Make sure you've got someone who's going to come and see your film. Because you might believe it's the best script that you've written or that you've developed with someone and that you're the best director out there and you're going to make a great film. But someone's got to want to watch it. And really early on, you know, we were very lucky, and through social media and through Facebook and through the Indiegogo campaign, you know, we very quickly had, you know, over 1,000 likes on the Kajaki page long before we'd shot. You know, so that's sort of 1,000 people who you pretty much think they're going to go and see it. They don't know anything about it. They just know this war film is going to be made set in Afghanistan about, you know, the Paras in 2006. And I think, you know, that looking over the end of the shoot and over the end of the edit at what's your plan, that's what I'd say is important. Yeah.
And you mentioned your production company. What are you up to at the moment in terms of anything we should be looking out for?
Well, the day job's going okay. I think the company did a little bit of TLC after certainly after I'd spent 6 months in the desert. So that's all happening. We have a number of projects in development. It still takes forever, obviously.
Yeah.
We've got 3 very exciting projects that hopefully, I'm hoping in the next few months we'll have some news on those.
Great, we look forward to that. Thank you both very much for joining us today, and thank you all for watching.
Thank
It's been
you.
a pleasure.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, bye-bye.